Good morning, Esoteric Covenant Cocktailers. I hope that you guys are having a great week. Breaking a little bit of new technology here, trying to do some web videos, maybe to go along with our Bible study. If you're studying along with us, you know we're actually dealing with the introductions to Mark, and with Mark's gospel is really simple. The first verse just says, "This is the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ." And if you look at Matthew and Luke's gospel, you'll find that both of them tend to lean toward the genealogy of Jesus. They each have a slightly different genealogy, but they seem to think that's really important to establish a foundation for the story and the message of Jesus. John, if we look at John's introduction is very theological. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was made flesh. Then it goes into the ministry of John the Baptist. So, in the introduction passages of each of these four Gospels, uh, all go from the beginning verses up until the ministry of John. So, and then if we go to the Gospel of Thomas, which is again a favorite Gospel of mine, it just simply says these are the secret sayings that Jesus shared with his disciple Thomas. And of course, Thomas doesn't really is not really so much concerned with the story of Jesus as much as the things that Jesus taught. So in the introduction, those are the things that I want to look at. And there's probably some other gospels that we could look at. And if some of you guys may be more familiar with them than others, so if any of you guys have a favorite non-canonical gospel that you would like to examine and maybe bring some points on that'd be great to add to this dimension. I think at this point what would be really good to focus on is the origins of these gospels. Why were they written? These gospels weren't just found under a rock somewhere. They weren't just an accidental thing. Somebody sat down, wrote these gospels, and when they did, they had an intention in mind. And the traditional Christian doctrine is that the four gospels are, inspired of the Holy Spirit and inerrant and such as that. But in which I have no problem with the inspiration of any gospel that shares the truth about Jesus Christ. I feel like God inspired many witnesses of Christ, and certainly Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are among those. But the question is, we would ask ourselves the question: is the traditional view of the Gospels the view of the Gospels that we should take? Should we lean toward inerrancy and fallibility, or are these just records of people who knew and were aware of what Jesus said and did, and should we take them in that light? How should we take these Gospels? What were their purpose? Why did they write these down? And I think motivation goes to understanding to some degree why these Gospels were written. And I think all that's important. So that's some good things to discuss. If anybody has some thoughts on that, I'd like to see some interaction there. What do you think? Why do you think Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written? How do you read these Gospels? Do you think all four were written before AD 70? Do you think they were written perhaps after AD 70, some of them? Do you think they were written by the original, the traditional authors, or were they written by different authors? That's some things we want to look at, because I think that's going to kind of color how we read and interpret these Gospels. So some of the things to think about as we go into introductions and maybe a couple more thoughts as the week progresses, and specifically the simplicity of Mark and this is the beginning of the Gospel of Jesus Christ. Very simple. We start there with the oldest Gospel, and we go as various to a complexity of John's Gospel, of very deep theological statements about even taking the ministry of Christ before the creation of the world. So some thoughts to think about as we study and we kind of lay a foundation of where we're going with this in the Gospels project. So you guys have a great week and enjoy your studies.